Engineering is all about taking risks and figuring out which ones are worth taking. Wasam,
Okay.
I'm not a big believer yet.
Wow.
As a technology, it's risky to propose to enterprises, hey, you move to Kubernetes, now rethink everything once again.
Yeah.
When you don't know what you're building, when you're still trying to discover which problem you should be solving, you have to iterate fast. And in that stage, a very complex architecture kind of gets in the way.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have users, writing code to scale to 10,000 users, it's not the best.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Incidentally Reliable podcast, where we peek into our guest's journey so far, talk about their maneuvered nightmares, engineering innovations made in distress, and especially their war room stories. So today we have Ramiro from Okteto. He's the founder and CEO of Okteto, a cloud-native development platform that allows developers to build and test their applications directly in Kubernetes clusters, streamlining the development workflow. Is that correct, Ramiro?
That is correct. Thank you, Shiva, for having me here.
Yeah.
Nice chatting with you.
Yeah. What does an average day as the CEO of Okteto look for you like?
That's an interesting question. I don't think there's an average day when it comes to the life of a CEO, especially the CEO of an early stage startup focusing on developer tools. I normally try to split my day into talking to customers. That to me or users. That's the most important thing. That's why I'm here at KubeCon, because that's how you get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
We also have we have a weekly meeting where all the leaders of different teams at Okteto and I get together and discuss week blockers, deliverables, strategy. So I spend a lot of that. And I also spend a lot of time just on mega fun of this, but now I'm kind of an email developer because I spend a lot of time using email as a way to reach out to prospects, talk to our investors, follow up with things. I think something everyone forgets when you have a startup is it's also a business. You have to run the business, pay the bills, deal with HR. But overall, for those of you who want to do your own company, it's always key to spend a good chunk of every day talking to users, talking to customers. This could be one-on-one or on Twitter, on Reddit, in Hacker News, on conference, but it's very important.
Yeah. So, could you tell us more about Okteto? And is there a deeper story behind Okteto's mission? What compelled you to build in this space?
Yeah. So I've been, before being founder and CEO, I've been an engineer all my career. I've worked on very large companies like Microsoft, Atlassian, as well as some startups. And I was lucky enough to be part of the DevOps, then Docker communities from very early on. Same with cloud native. So as the cloud native idea was gestating, as everything was growing, when I was a developer, I kind of kept hitting some of these issues around how different production from development is, how hard it is to get my code from my computer to a testing environment. And all of those things kept happening when I was at Microsoft, when I was at Elasticbox, when I was at Atlassian. So at some point during my tenure at Atlassian, I started building some internal tools that looked a bit like Okteto. Back then, the idea was, hey, I want a one-click experience to have, a copy of HipChat, which was my product. And then when my time there was over, and my co-founder's time at Docker and Google was over, we were kind of talking, and then we all discovered that, hey, we all have this problem. It's been very annoying for all of us. Why don't we train? And then we say, hey, and Kubernetes is becoming a big thing. Why don't we try to fix it?
Yeah, well, that's a great mission. And you're trying to streamline developer experience. And very recently have, companies started to involve in that space, focusing more on the developer instead of the customer, because if your developer is empowered, your customer is empowered quicker. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. You identified a very newer problem. Are there other problems that you still face to this day that you're waiting for a company to come up and fix? In DevOps, development, anything?
Oh, there's so many. Yes. I think that personally, for example, all the authoring of manifests, all this YAML everywhere, it's a big problem. I think it's a problem that it solved a lot of things. I'm a big fan of infra code. I remember the days before infra code. But I think we still have a long way to make it easier for more people to consume it. It requires a lot of experience. I think observability is a field that, as applications get more complex,
Yeah.
more things can fail. I mean, you know this with Zenduty. And I think it's an area that it's ripe for innovation because the world of expecting that you have a bunch of people who are experts on every single thing of the stack
Mhm.
to help you it's unreal. And also, and this is not self-service, the work you guys are doing on incident management, I think is also very important. When I was in HipChat, we had a lot of incidents and there was no tooling to handle it. So it was all based on like, oh, open a channel, okay, create a doc, put the link here, call all these people. It was really hard. And back then we didn't know what we were doing. We're kind of like trying to figure out what chat ops and incident management meant. And I find that space very interesting because more and more companies build software and it matters that software works. I was talking to somebody yesterday here at KubeCon and we were talking about how the bar we all expect for software is going higher and higher. And this is whether it's commercial or internal. And when software fails, you want to fix it quickly. And the sooner you can do all that, the sooner that you have a way to replicate the issue, the right people in, the right infra running, it's very important. So I am very excited about that space, actually.
I mean, companies just can't afford downtime any longer. It's a competitive market, and with like when you can't afford downtime, you cannot afford security issues as well. So when you're helping hundreds of customers handle critical infra operations, security is a day zero concern for you naturally. So how is your team integrating security considerations early in the development cycle, to ensure more reliable and secure applications?
Yeah, but as you can imagine, as we are a company that sells a developer experience product, we care deeply about developer experience internally. From day one, when we set up the initial version of Okteto and all the infra, we build with all the best practices in mind. GitOps, early scanning, alerts, monitoring, all those things. Something we do a lot that I like is we use our most product, Cube Warden? No, I'm blanking on it. But anyway, security product to, for example, scan all of our images to make sure that we patch them as quickly as possible. We incorporate, our dev environments, which is powered by our product. We use our own product, allow you to have very realistic looking dev environments. So we incorporate observability, alerting, logging, security scanning from the dev flow, which means that our developers, when they're writing a code and before they even push to main, or not even main, before they push to a pull request, they know that, hey, you added a dependency that has this CVE, or you didn't add the right observability traces. And all of that helps us build a more secure software, because for us, it's very important, for everybody. But our platform is used for a lot of very large companies to run their own code, their own applications. So it's very important for it to be secure, to be resilient. So we incorporate a lot of that. And then on top of that, our engineers are really good at we're a big proponent of chaos engineering. So we do a lot of failure injection, try things. And I do a lot of just clicking around all the time. I love using our products. I'm always trying to find things that are broken as well.
So have you had that, like you mentioned, chaos engineering, right? So have you had the chance to implement any newer chaos engineering practices at your org? This is the first time hearing of one of our speakers being in chaos engineering. So we'll have to, let our listeners know about that as well.
Yeah, so I used to be a maintainer of Litmus Chaos. I still participate, but less. Being a CEO takes a lot of time. I've been a big proponent of chaos engineering for a very long time. There's actually a couple of talks I gave with the founder of, one of the main founders of Litmus Chaos on KubeCon. It is something we use. Yeah, we fault injection, especially for complex applications, is fundamental. The old assumption that if it compiles, if it passes my end-to-end tests, it's enough. It doesn't make sense anymore in a cloud native world where you have so many different pieces. So things like ensuring that if a pod goes away and then comes back, that your application is resilient to that, ensuring that you have a load balancing, that you have redundancy. Those things are very important. We don't do super sophisticated, data center melting down kind of simulations, but failure, slowdown in the network, DNS resolution failure, a lot of those things are key to ensure that your software, especially because for us, we have an on-premise solution as well. So we need to account for things that can happen on our customers' data centers. that under normal circumstances you wouldn't see in places like AWS.
Yeah.
Like, for example, a disk just blowing up.
So when you were talking about security, you were talking about shifting left essentially, right? So yours is a much more younger, agile team that would be receptive to changing their practices, and a lot of developers feel that shifting left interrupts with their development workflows. And so how would you imagine, like, if you were in the reins of a more established organization, like you were previously at Atlassian and Microsoft, how would an organization like that, empower the developers to incorporate these practices as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is a challenge that we see a lot because our customers are companies like that. There are customers who will come to us because they want a better developer experience.
Yeah.
And they understand the reasons for shift left and all those things and the values. But they don't want to have their developers just, you now have more responsibility than before.
Exactly.
So we see that a lot. And this is where the world of platform engineering can help a lot.
Yeah.
Like part of what we do with our customers is, as you were saying, you were alluding to this earlier, is we partner with the platform engineering team. But the actual user of this partnership, this platform, is the developer.
Yeah.
So what large companies do, that I've seen they do to be successful in this, is really thinking of the needs of developers. You cannot put more work on a developer's plate because then you have to take something away.
Yeah.
Abstractions, golden paths, well-designed platforms, self-service experiences are fundamental here to make sure that they have the tools they need at the right time. Because when you're shifting left, the best thing you can do is make it invisible.
Yeah.
A good example of this is what we do with vulnerability. We have a product for preview environments, which means that every time you open a pull request, automatically an environment will be created.
Okay.
If you configure that with a scanner for like image vulnerability, then you're making the life of the developer easier, because when they open the pull request, which is the normal process they follow, one more check that fails when an image is out of date is something that is not creating extra work for the developer, because most of the time it will be green. It's not an annoyance that they have to like remember, before you commit, run this script and then do this sort of thing. And then that is how you gain a lot of buy-in, because developers don't want to commit bad code. They don't want to have security issues. That we all believe strongly in what we build. There's a craft. There's pride in our craft. So putting all these automated checks everywhere just makes it easier. And I think that is the path we all need to follow. And that is where the conversation on golden paths, on platform engineering, on being an enabler and not just kind of a team that says no, are very key. And the larger the team, the more this matters.
Yeah. So shifting left definitely releases a lot of technical debt as well for companies. And I imagine that you guys have gotten a good grasp on that. So how do you manage technical debt at your company right now?
That's an interesting question, because every team has challenges, and for us personally, as an early stage kind of like fast growing company, we need to be very careful about managing technical debt, because you're iterating fast. So not everything we build works. Some of the things we build, customers don't like them or they don't see value. So you have to iterate fast. So our CTO is always been very good at like figuring it out. Okay, when is the right time to like devote to like solve the technical debt, and when it's okay to kind of just lift the rug and sweep it in. Because what I've seen in the past is that sometimes teams spend too much time cleaning it up, and you run the risk of paralysis, because then you're just iterating on the same code.
You do.
And the reality is that customers don't care about your code; they care about what you're solving. And that's very key. It's a very hard thing to balance. But this is where, I've spoken about a lot of major organizations who care deeply about developer experience. And just like, cleaning your house is easier if you do it a little bit every day rather than once, every month. The same, I think that's what works best with technical debt, is allocate 5%, 10% of your time every quarter, every month, every sprint. Fix a little, sandbox it, have a clear goal, go at it small, and just continuous effort pays off exponentially. Because I've seen companies that they do like an entire quarter of like, okay, now we're going to clean the code. That doesn't work. The risk is very high. And then that's not that your customers don't care. I mean, if it's getting in the way, maybe, but they don't care, right? They care about high-performing software that solves a problem they have. So it's very important. especially for small teams, to be very careful because technical debt, it's kind of like financial debt. Like if you manage it well, it's a tool that helps you. If you don't manage it well, it can sink you. And the same goes for that.
I get that. And like you solve technical debt, but like you're still innovating at the cutting edge, and that involves you using and leveraging a lot of technologies that are still, they're mature, but they're evolving constantly. So that opens up your own infra to a lot of unknown unknowns.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's one of the risks, and like engineering is all about taking risks and figuring out which ones are worth taking.
Yeah.
Because you can go the path of like building everything yourself, right?
Yeah.
And in the past, I've worked for companies that they will build. I mean, I work for Microsoft. They build their own OS, their own cloud infra, their own databases, but that requires massive investments.
Yeah.
I work for startups where we took bets on Kubernetes and companies or containers, where you're taking this early bet in something that might or might not work.
Yeah.
It's part of the nature of the game. I think it's important because building is very expensive.
Yeah.
And as a company, you always need to be very careful about putting most of your efforts on the things that will make a difference for your company.
Yeah.
And sometimes, take risks, limit the radius of it.
Right.
That's where, things like the CNCF have made a huge improvement into like building a higher level of trust, higher level of these projects are good.
Yeah.
But, sometimes there's all these interesting projects on the edge that solve a problem you have. And I think you need to take them because sometimes that is the best path forward. I mean, you have to be careful and build all the guardrails around it to make sure that if it fails, you don't it doesn't become like a company destruction event.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of like adopting technology early and helping mold it because I've seen it when it works.
Yeah.
You go way faster.
I agree. And like you mentioned that you've worked at Atlassian and Microsoft, bigger behemoths that have like varying level of, I would say, metal in different teams. So what are some pure engineering nightmares that you inherited as a team member in your journey so far?
There's so many of those. When I joined Microsoft, I was working for the team building the .NET framework.
Okay.
And I was a QA engineer at first. When I joined, I inherited something like 15,000 tests that I had to monitor on a quarterly basis because as a big company, Microsoft cared a lot about interoperability, backwards compatibility, localization. So we had all this tests of okay, we're gonna run. You have to make sure that the REST protocol between the library we released for Windows Mobile version X is compatible with a server running on Windows, on Linux version, Ubuntu, whatever. So it was very interesting to kind of realize that these large companies, there's large responsibility, and that was kind of a nightmare. It was cool to build the tooling around it. That was one. In Atlassian, we had a few of those as well, especially as we were moving HipChat from a startup kind of like chat to like a high scale chat for enterprises. There was a lot of engineering into how do you take the initial idea, cool software, easy to use, but make it enterprise and have some of the largest kind of European or American firms trust it. So that was very interesting as well. There was a lot of engineering, a lot of quality testing, a lot of managing reliability. So it was a lot of fun, and I always recommend everybody, if you got a chance, to work in a large company for a bit. Because I learned a lot about the craft of engineering at these large companies. It has helped me a lot once I made the transition to small, more agile, early stage startups.
So Ramiro, we see more and more startups over-engineering DevOps and production operations. They're starting up, and this is not a new conversation. And often seen people are coming with experience of a higher scale that they're just not there. They're not facing the problems that they're solving right now. What's your take on this?
Oh no, I'm laughing because I'm as guilty of that as the most. When I started Okteto, and I came from Atlassian, I had built these very large pipelines and architecture at scale for tens of thousands of users at a time. And when we started building Okteto, I built a lot of the initial infra, kind of using those patterns.
I understand.
And it was completely over-engineered. I have all these CI pipelines and tests before we really had anything. It's fun. I love doing those things. But it's dangerous because of what we were saying earlier, where if you spend too much time building this, it's time you're not spending iterating on the product. And especially on the early stages, when you don't know what you're building, when you're still trying to like discover which problem you should be solving, you have to iterate fast. And in that stage, a very complex architecture kind of gets in the way.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have users, writing code to scale to like 10,000 users, it's not the best. So that's something that all of us engineers need to fight. That, you know, we all have this instinct, I guess, of like writing high performance code that scales well. We have to fight that instinct, because rewriting your code every 2-3 years as your product hits different scales, it's a better use of time, and I think it actually ends up getting you like better results.
So let's channel your entrepreneur again instead of the engineer. And we've just seen over 250 startups right here who are, really building new solutions. And there are so many more founders out there, building tools in DevOps, in engineering. What's a piece of advice that you'd like to give to any other DevTool founder out there today?
That's a good question. Advice for DevTools founders. First of all, congratulations. It's really cool. Like, anybody who has a problem and sees a novel way of solving it, it's commendable.
Yeah.
One of the advice I give everybody, and it's cliche, but it's true, and it takes a while to internalize, is don't fall in love with your solution, fall in love with the problem.
I understand.
Like solving a problem, because most likely the first few ways you think of solving the problem are going to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to, like in my case, right, we wanted to solve the problem of like developer experience in Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And that's been our guiding light. But we tried different things, and then we found that the way Okteto does it right now got good feedback. There's a market. Now we're kind of like, okay, 100% this. But for a bit, we're trying different things. So that's very important. And the other for developer tools, especially if you're building a company, is remember you have to make money. So it's very important early on to find paying customers.
Yeah.
Because just building for free, for like free users, just open source, is very dangerous, because you can run into a situation that is actually fairly common, where you're building a tool that solves a real problem,
Mm-hmm.
but that nobody is willing to pay to get solved, because it's not really on the priority of the decision makers, not of the engineer, but actually on the person in a company who decides on what to spend the money.
Yeah.
So the sooner you can get to talk to these people, the sooner you can get to a few paying customers. It's not about the amount. It's more about like when you get somebody to pay, anything. It makes a huge difference, because it changes how you're building it. It changes the relationship you have with the user.
Yeah.
The way you get feedback is different, because when you're building something for free, all your friends are going to be, because they're nice people, they're going to be like, oh, this is great. I love it. But then when you ask them, okay, would you pay X? They're like, oh, well, actually, we don't have budget.
Yeah.
And then you get the real feedback. And that's something we got right. I mean, we stumbled into it, but very early on, we had paying customers. And that made a huge difference in what we're building, how we're building it, the roadmap. And I think it leads to a much better product. Sometimes you have to spend years, because you're building something that is so far ahead that you need the market to kind of catch up. Those are very risky.
Yeah.
I would recommend that if yours is the first time you build a company. But if you do, good luck. It's amazing. And a lot of like the game-changing technologies came to us that way. But if it's your first venture, I do recommend try something that has a 2-year window where you're gonna get customers paying, just to make sure that you have enough validation that your time is worth in this pursuit versus the other million problems that you all could be solving.
That's great advice, Ramiro. And so we've been talking about platform engineering for a while, and a lot of these, there are so many tools that are trying to empower teams to build internal developer portals over here. And before this, and even still, I would say there are a lot of teams that build and leverage internal portals, but they're not built to be reliable. They're built in a very hacky way, because they're like, hey, it's our own developers using it, they know their way around. But they don't realize that sometimes these portals are their way to solving a bigger problems. These are not reliable portals. Have you seen something like this in the wild?
We see that a lot. There's a big shift in platform engineering that's happening right now. Now that it's a more understood problem, people are realizing what you just said.
Yeah.
Like, you're building a platform to accelerate your team. The more your team depends on the platform, the more important the platform is reliable. Because if you build a platform that is kind of hacked away and scripts here and there, and then teams take dependency on that, the moment that your platform is offline, if you have an incident, if you have a bug, if it fails to scale, now you're affecting the efficiency of all the teams that are depending on you.
Yeah.
And you're losing their trust. And that is really hard to recover. And this is why when we talk to customers, the idea of building your own platform, your internal developer, your own IDP, is something that teams need to take very seriously into consideration.
Yeah.
Because it's not just building it, it's keeping it running for the foreseeable future. That is very challenging.
Yeah.
There's a talk earlier, I think yesterday on KubeCon, it'll be online soon, on platforms are products and why you think of platforms as the same way you think about your production stuff. Like one of our customers, Monday.com, wrote this article and they were talking about how for the platform team, the internal developers are their customers.
Yeah.
They were like, hey, for the SRE team, the external customers are the customers. For the platform team, our developers are our customers. Because if we don't do a good job as a platform team, our developers are not going to do a good job.
Yeah.
And then that's going to cascade into the company not doing well.
Yeah.
So it's very important when you're building platforms to think of every single concern you think about when you're building your product. Logging, tracing, observability, scale, reliability. That's why if you can avoid it, I do recommend, I know I'm biased here, but I recommend go with a vendor, try to find a partner, because then you can pass on the responsibility to somebody whose main job is to keep platforms running.
Yeah.
But if you can or you don't want to for whatever reason, and there are many valid reasons, do take into consideration in your planning to do all these things, because gaining the trust of developers is hard. Once they take dependency on you, if things don't go well, it's very easy to lose that trust and to cause them harm because you're making them less effective. And I've seen companies that sometimes the platform is so-so, and then suddenly like nobody can develop because they're blocked. And that has real monetary implications for companies.
Yeah, and that's a great thought. And I was just going to touch upon this one last thing. So, Ramiro, Okteto has been around for more than 5 years now, and I think there must be some mature practices that you guys have figured out at this point of time. So this involves in your alerting practices, your observability practices. So would you like to guide our listeners on something, if someone's at your same scale, are there any practices that you would recommend them to try out, so that they can balance both cost and reliability?
Yes. One of the things, as you said, we're mature enough now and we learned the good way and the hard way. I think playbooks is something that is severely underestimated, how powerful they can be. Like having a Google Doc or Notion or whatever you're using that lists, hey, when there's an incident, when you get the phone call that something is down, the steps you need to follow to solve the problem, having those documented makes a huge difference. Who you have to get involved, who you notify, where are the logs, where are the traces, who needs to be on like the chat room or the Zoom call. If you can automate that, even better. But just having this design makes a huge difference, because just like you want, repeatability in your product, you want it on all these things. So that's something that I feel like a lot of companies don't do, and then they just expect everyone to do the right thing when it happens. But as you scale, this is less likely. You have more different experience. And the other thing is kind of doing the simulacrums every now and then to make sure that people have the right access. Because that has happened to us, where you have the playbook and, okay, step one, go to like this Prometheus instance and download, the latest counters. And then when the incident happens, the person actually doesn't have permissions to log on to that cluster. And you're like, oh, and now what do I do? Who do I call? And when you have an incident, every second matters. You might have customers shouting at you because their system is down. You might have feeling like personal pressure because you don't want to let your team down. So I think playbooks is something that in the world of SREs, in the world of like reliability and incident management, are very, very important. Run them every now and then, and just make sure everybody has access to everything they need. And also make sure that people don't have right access to production. Because when you're running around an incident at 2 a.m, it's very easy to click the wrong button and delete customers' data. I've done it. So make sure those things are protected, because that way, everybody can go faster.
So I have 3 rapid fire questions for you now, Ramiro. And, just the first thing off your mind. Okay, 3 startups that you're rooting for.
I like SteadyBit. They're doing chaos engineering.
Okay.
I like that a lot. I like Commodore. I think what they're doing
Okay.
around is really cool.
Yeah.
And there's another one I just met. I like TestQ. I think what they're doing on the CI testing work is very interesting as well.
All right. One enterprise that has fallen off and could do better.
VMware.
And lastly, what's a controversial opinion about the current space that you have?
A controversial opinion. Interesting. I think that Wasam,
Okay.
I'm not a big believer yet.
Wow.
I think
It's
that
controversial.
the world of like you have to rewrite everything once again is a very dangerous proposition. I like that they're risking it by saying it's one of the many ways. I think there's very interesting things about Wasam, but I think that as a technology, it's risky to propose to enterprises, hey, you move to Kubernetes,
Yeah.
now rethink everything once again.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends in the space. I think it's fascinating, but I think it's very risky. And I think as a community, we need to take a more enterprise. Like we need to think of the enterprises more and how the message of Wasam gets delivered.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of peer pressure on Wasam as well.
Yeah.
Everyone's been chatting about it, and they're like, "Hey, if you're not following, you're really losing out." It's very similar to how Gen AI has come out, and every week you'd see this one Twitter thread, someone saying, "Hey, if you're not following up what's happening in Gen AI this week, you're really losing out."
No, you're completely right. And the thing for us that we have to remember is that Kubernetes is now powering pretty much all the compute in the world. So we now have a responsibility, not just for the bleeding edge, but for like governments, banks, energy, like all the traditional sectors.
Yeah.
And they get very confused when they see, hey, okay, I bought your ideas around containers, around Kubernetes, and now you're talking about this Wasm thing. So I think we have to be very careful in how we continue to innovate because it's fundamental. We can't just get stuck on things, but in a way that we also show the world that we get it. We are shipping hardened things with enterprises. And this is where vendors help a lot because you can have the open source projects be bleeding edge, the experimentals, some early vendors, like Fermion, pushing ahead. But we need the community to also understand that for a very substantial part of the world, Kubernetes are containers, are bleeding edge. So we need to give them the comfort. Yeah, bet on this. It's okay. It's supported before here's a new thing.
I completely agree with that.
And AI is following I think AI is following the same pattern as you said.
Yeah. It's been great chatting, Ramiro. I hope to be in touch for a lot more of these chats for sure. What's the best war room story you have for us?
The best war room story. And thank you for having me, by the way. Very, very excited. I love the questions. So in my past, I can't say names, but in my past, I was working for this company and we had a major incident, very sophisticated, where this attacker was able to kind of like do some execution. They had this process running that looked like Python, like the Python interpreter.
Okay.
But our security team was running scans on like process signatures and discovered that Python process didn't match any well-known signature of like a Python interpreter.
Okay.
So the discovery was somebody who kind of like recompiled the Python interpreter to add some extra code to kind of like get executable scripts, but then send the content to like a server somewhere else to hack not us, but our customers.
All right.
And later on, we kind of had to hire like a forensic firm and everything. And it was very messy. It turned out to be another country that was trying to hack like kind of some major industries in the US. So it was very interesting because, for us, we just hey, our students down.
Yeah.
But we were dealing with a level of sophistication.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting to see when companies have to partner with specialists and bring people from this kind of like very high level cybersecurity firms. We ended up reporting a SEP0 to Linux, which was a really interesting, cool experience. It was really interesting how what started as we thought was just kind of have some bad code causing like extra CPUs. Got into this, and I learned a lot of what it means to run, an incident that runs for months, but at different layers, because you have like the immediate incident, like a restore functionality. But then you have the deal with like the Linux security process until the kernel gets patched. Deal with like the legal aspects until it gets solved. Deal with like the cybersecurity. until it gets solved. And that was a really cool experience.
Well, it was great chatting, Ramiro. That's all the time we have for now. Thank you so much for taking out your time and sitting down with us. This is Ramiro from Okteto. If you'd like to boost your developers' productivity, do check out Okteto. And that's all for now. See you guys later.